I'm going to do now is quickly tell you a brief history of the company. Now, Marshall, some people don't quite understand, but Marshall are actually a British company, and because they're seen all over the world, and obviously the amps are seen on backlines of stages all around the world, a lot of people tend to think that Marshall are American, and there's absolutely no truth in that. Marshall began in 1962, started by our founder, our governor, our leader, who we love very much, Dr. Jim Marshall, OBE, as he's known now. Jim originally started off life as a drummer. He had a very hard upbringing as a child. He suffered, he was in and out of hospital quite a lot. His family were very poor, and he trained as an engineer, and also was a singer and a drummer as well. So he took up drums, and in the early 60s he opened his own drum shop, and he sold drums out of the shop, he taught drums out of the shop, and the drummers were coming in with their guitarists, and there was one guitarist who came in, who was a guy called Pete Townsend, who was very interested in the amps, because until then he'd used Fender quite a lot. And Fender are great. Fender are a great company. There's absolutely no doubt in that. They make brilliant amps and they make excellent guitars. But up until then, guitar playing had been very clean and very tidy and all just very nice, a lot like the Beatles. And I always compare it like the Beatles are Fender and Marshall is more like the Rolling Stones. You know what I mean? It's a lot more dirty and filthy kind of thing, and a bit more of a bad boy attitude. So they found that by designing an amp that you could really wind up, a valve amp that you could really crank up, the sound would start to break up and you get this thing called distortion. Now distortion has come a long way since then, and the JVM that you're hearing now has more gain in it than any other Marshall ever found before. If you guys could keep coming in, keep the door clear, come on, we'll be friendly. And so between Jim and Pete Townsend, they came up with the idea of creating the Marshall stack. Now what this was Pete Townsend wanted to be louder than everybody else, quite simply. And between him and Jim, they came up with this idea of running the head into a cabinet that was about this high and contained 8 12-inch speakers. It was one single huge cabinet with just a couple of little bathroom-type handles on the side. A few years ago, they made, for the 40th anniversary of the stack, they made a reproduction of the original 8x12 cabinet, and we used to take it out on some road shows. I used to sort of sit there and laugh watching the guys trying to get it into venues, because the thing was just massive. It was like a huge American fridge freezer kind of thing, you know, it was so big. And so Pete Townsend came back to Jim soon after and said, look, my roadies are really struggling with this, Jim. What can we do? Jim just said, quite simply what we'll do, we'll cut the cabinet in half, make 2 cabinets. That's how the Marshall stack and the 4x12 was invented. Marshall were the first to invent a 4x12. And obviously it wasn't patented, and many other companies have gone on to make their own versions of the 4x12, but Marshall were the first. So, I have something to read out to you. And if you guys were here yesterday, you'll know what this is. This is a letter dated from 1962 from a customer of Jim's who had bought one of the first Marshalls ever made. And he didn't have too much money. He'd actually got behind on his payments, the naughty boy, because Jim at the time looked like he was doing some quite good payment plans if you wanted to buy an amp from him. Incidentally, the very first Marshall amp ever built was sold to a customer and then bought back some years later and is now the centrepiece of the Marshall Museum. If any of you guys in here are ever in the Milton Keynes area and want to come for a look around the factory, it's a great place to be. And you're more than welcome. Go and see the guys down on the stand and book yourselves in. It doesn't cost anything either. Or if you've got an amp that wants to be serviced, you can bring it in yourself and go and have a factory tour while you're at it. So this letter is from this customer, a very happy customer, very pleased with his amp, but got late on the payments, and sent this letter in to Jim and Terry, who is Jim's son, who were running the shop. So 1962. Dear sir, I'm very sorry about the delay in payment on my account, and I hope that it's not too late for me to try and catch up on it. My intention now is to send the monthly instalments that I owe week by week until I have cleared my arrears, and I'm back on the normal monthly payment system. I enclose the first payment with this letter. Yours most apologetically, Eric Clapton. Yeah, no, he still hasn't paid. Can you believe it? We're trying to get hold of him. So, I mean, obviously Clapton was one of the first users of Marshall as well. He used to play a little combo, which was then nicknamed the Blues Breaker, because he used it on the John Mayall Blues Breakers album, and that's, you know, Clapton's one of his first sounds was from that. So looking now, over 45 years later, here we have the Marshall JVM, still the same essence of that very first Marshall made, but since then we've seen so many different changes. We've seen the master volume amp be created, so you can drive the preamp of the amp and you can control it on the master volume. We've had channel switching, we've had built-in effects and stuff like that. So this really is everything that Marshall have strived for in the last over 45 years in one box. It's a 4-channel amp. There's 3 modes per channel, so 3 separate sounds per channel, each time bringing more gain into the stage. Across 4 channels, that's 12 different sounds. 2 master volumes, 4 separate reverb pots, so you can adjust different amount of reverbs for each channel. The foot switch comes included. It's connected with just a guitar lead, which is really revolutionary. You can completely program the foot switch to how you want, what sounds you want to store to whichever button on the foot switch. It might sound really complicated, but it's not, because you've got to think, as I say, that first Marshall, it all sort of stems from that. To give you an example, the clean channel, the 3 different modes on the clean channel. First, you've got your good old clean. Still on that clean channel, the next mode, I just hit the channel button on there, and now we get a bit more dirt going on. Switching up to the last mode, which is indicated with a red light, you now get like more of a vintage Marshall kind of sound. You've got your 3 other channels which are voiced completely differently, going to the really heavy overdrive that you heard in the last song I just played. So as you didn't hear too much of the clean in the last song, I'm going to do another tune. This is a song from my album, which is dedicated to hillbilly music.